Tonight, pressure is building for a ceasefire in Ukraine, and Washington is sprinting to put a signature on a plan before the battlefield writes its own ending. U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is meeting Russians in Abu Dhabi as part of a fast-moving push to translate a revised U.S. plan into an actual stop to the shooting, with some U.S. officials telling CBS that Ukraine has largely said yes, just minor details left, while Russia stays publicly non-committal and missiles still slam into Kyiv's neighborhoods and power grids, even as Ukraine sends waves of drones toward Russian ports. That split screen, paper peace versus real war, is the story. Here's the core. The original 28-point U.S. proposal, reworked after Swiss talks and European complaints, leans on the toughest questions first. Territory in the east and Crimea under de facto Russian control, a freeze along current lines in parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia, and a demilitarized buffer strip in Donetsk. Exactly the kind of concessions Ukrainians call red lines, because they turn the places they bled for into bargaining chips, and because any freeze risks becoming tomorrow's launchpad. Critics say this rewards aggression. Fans say it saves lives now. The plan also caps Ukraine's army size and pushes a NATO not now, maybe never posture that Moscow favors, even as Europe fights to keep the door technically open and to bulk up security guarantees, so they sound less like vague promises and more like hard deterrents. Think of it as a tug-of-war between a quick deal and a durable peace, and Trump sits right in the middle, branding himself the closer. Politically, this is a high-wire act. Politico says Trump wants peace, no matter what the deal looks like. An outcome-first stance that thrills voters tired of endless war, but alarms Republicans who don't want America to oversee the map shrinking of a sovereign ally. And that internal split matters because any U.S. security guarantees, or sanction snapbacks, only means something if Congress will fund and enforce them. Meanwhile, CBS is reporting that only minor details remain collides with battlefield facts. Kyiv mourns fresh civilian losses after massive barges. NATO jets scramble from Romania when drones stray, and inside Russia, local officials talk about damage in strategic port cities. Negotiators are racing a clock set not by calendars, but by the next strike window. So what should Americans watch? 3 red flags and 3 green lights. Red flags. Territorial concessions that could incentivize future land grabs. Troop caps that may kneecap Ukraine's defense if the truce cracks. And an amnesty idea that may bury accountability for war crimes. Green lights. A real ceasefire that saves lives immediately. A structured channel for Russia. NATO deconfliction to shrink risk of escalation. And a reconstruction package with frozen Russian assets that can reboot Ukraine's economy if the guns truly go silent. Bottom line, the deal's soul is still in flux. Europeans are sanding down the sharpest edges. Ukraine is signaling openness to a framework, but not to surrender. Russia is keeping its cards close, and Trump is chasing a moment big enough to define a presidency. If you hear peace tomorrow, read the fine print. What borders are set, what armies are allowed, who guarantees what, and what happens the day after a signature when the cameras leave and the first checkpoint gets tested. The leader's declaration was adopted with overwhelming support. A document that Lamola called a step toward multilateralism and toward building a bridge between the global North and the global South. But Lamola also sent a powerful message earlier in the year when the U.S. declined to participate in some preparatory meetings, saying the G20 should send a clear message that the world can move on with or without the U.S. And that statement takes on new meaning now because the absence of the United States didn't derail the summit. It actually highlighted how the global South is increasingly capable of setting the agenda and driving global conversations without waiting for permission from traditional power centers. Let's talk about the diplomatic chess match that played out here because both sides were making calculated moves. The United States initially said they wouldn't attend at all, then tried to send a junior official at the last minute, which South Africa saw as an attempt to check a box without showing real commitment. And South Africa's response was masterful because they didn't refuse the handover. That would have been seen as obstructionist. Instead saying, fine, we'll hand over, but we'll do it on terms that match the level of respect you're showing us. Lamola's spokesperson, Crispin Fireeye, was even more direct. The United States is not attending. We will mark them absent. And we have marked them absent. The whole world is here, and that's what we want to focus on, our agenda. Those who are not present are not present. It is what it is. And this whole situation was further complicated by inflammatory remarks from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who accused President Ramaphosa of running his mouth, a comment that sparked outrage in South Africa and was seen as deeply disrespectful. The tensions also reflect broader strains between the two countries, with Trump's claims about South Africa, the U.S. withdrawal from several preparatory meetings, and now this protocol dispute all being part of a deteriorating relationship. But South Africa held firm, with Minister Lamola emphasizing, "We did not deny anyone access." The United States is a member of the G20, and if they won't be represented, they can still send anyone at the right level. It's the leaders' summit, and the right level is head of state. It's a special envoy appointed by the president of that country. It could be a minister. So what does all this mean for international relations and global governance? First, it's a clear signal that middle power nations, countries that aren't superpowers but have significant influence, are increasingly willing to stand their ground, with South Africa not backing down even when facing pressure from the world's largest economy. Second, it highlights a shift in global power dynamics because for decades Western nations set the rules and expected others to follow. But now with economic power shifting eastward and southward, those rules are being questioned, and the fact that 4 consecutive global South nations have led the G20 isn't a coincidence. It's a trend. Third, this affects how future summits and international gatherings will function, because if the United States continues to selectively engage or disengage from multilateral forums, other nations are showing they'll proceed without them. Lamola's earlier comment about the world moving on with or without the U.S. isn't just rhetoric. This summit proved it can actually happen, with the summit successfully adopting its leaders' declaration, launching a compact with Africa for development, and setting priorities for sustainable development, all without U.S. leadership participation. And President Ramaphosa expressed hope that the next G20 summit would be held on a mutually agreed date, but also made it clear that South Africa successfully concluded its presidency on its own terms. For the United States, this creates a question. Can you maintain global leadership if you're not showing up? Trump's America First approach means withdrawing from or downgrading participation in international forums. But this episode shows that those forums continue without American participation, and sometimes they don't really miss it. So here's the bottom line. What looked like a simple ceremonial handover became a defining moment about respect, protocol, and shifting global power, with South Africa standing firm on principle, saying that if you want to be treated as a major power, you need to act like one, showing that African nations and the global South won't accept being treated as less than, even by superpowers, and Minister Lamola's words. "We are done. It's up to them," captured this perfectly because South Africa did its job. They hosted a historic, successful summit. They're ready to hand over the presidency, but they won't compromise on dignity and protocol to do it. This is a story we'll be watching closely because it's about more than one handover. It's about the future of international cooperation in an increasingly multipolar world. So what do you think? Did South Africa make the right call? Should protocol matter this much in international relations? Or should they have just taken the practical approach and handed over to whoever showed up? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us bring you more in-depth international news analysis. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the stories shaping our world. And if you want to understand more about how international diplomacy really works behind the scenes, check out our related video in the card above. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. While all these personal controversies swirl around Patel, the FBI, under his direction, has launched an investigation that's raising profound constitutional questions and has alarmed members of both political parties. On November 18th, 6 Democratic members of Congress released a video on social media. All 6 are veterans. They've served in the military or intelligence community. The group includes Senators Mark Kelly of Arizona and Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, along with Representative Jason Crow of Colorado, Chris DeLuzio of Pennsylvania, Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire, and Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania. In the video, They delivered a straightforward message to current military personnel and intelligence officers. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders. They urged service members to stand up for our laws and our Constitution, and reminded them that their oath was to the Constitution, not to any individual president. The reaction from the Trump administration was explosive. President Trump took to Truth Social, writing in all caps, "Seditious behavior, punishable by death." Later, he clarified that he wasn't personally threatening death, saying, "I'm not threatening death, but I think they're in serious trouble." In the old days, it was death. That was seditious behavior. That was a big deal. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth labeled the group the Seditious Six, calling their video despicable, reckless, and false. He wrote, "Encouraging our warriors to ignore the orders of their commanders undermines every aspect of good order and discipline. Their foolish screed sows doubt and confusion, which only puts our warriors in danger." But here's what's really unprecedented. Both the Pentagon and the FBI have now opened investigations into these members of Congress. The Pentagon announced it's launching a review into Senator Mark Kelly, who is a retired Navy captain. They suggested he could potentially be court-martialed, claiming that military retirees remain subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. This would be extraordinary. The last comparable case anyone can point to dates back to 1925, when Army Colonel Billy Mitchell was convicted by court-martial for insubordination. Meanwhile, Kash Patel's FBI has requested interviews with all 6 lawmakers. According to sources, the FBI contacted the Capitol Police, who directed them to the House and Senate Sergeants at Arms. Senator Slotkin revealed that the FBI's Counterterrorism Division had opened an inquiry into the group. Let that sink in for a moment. The FBI's Counterterrorism Division, the unit that investigates Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and domestic terrorists, is investigating sitting members of Congress for reminding soldiers of their constitutional duty. The lawmakers' response has been defiant. In a joint statement, 4 of the House members said, "President Trump is using the FBI as a tool to intimidate and harass members of Congress. No amount of intimidation or harassment will ever stop us from doing our jobs and honoring our Constitution." Senator Kelly posted on social media, "If this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. I've given too much to this country to be silenced by bullies who care more about their own power than protecting the Constitution." Let's be clear about the legal issues here. The First Amendment protects free speech, including political speech by members of Congress. There's also the Speech or Debate Clause in Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution, which provides broad immunity to members of Congress for legislative activities. More fundamentally, the statement that soldiers can refuse illegal orders isn't controversial. It's established military law and international law dating back to the Nuremberg trials. The Uniform Code of Military Justice states that members of the military have an obligation not to follow unlawful orders. In fact, following an unlawful order can result in criminal prosecution. Some Republican senators have defended Kelly and the other lawmakers. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska stated, "To accuse him and other lawmakers of treason and sedition for rightfully pointing out that service members can refuse illegal orders is reckless and flat out wrong. The Department of Defense and FBI surely have more important priorities than this frivolous investigation." Senator John Curtis of Utah wrote, "As a colleague, I respect Mark Kelly and value his friendship. I know him as someone whose career has been defined by service. His record as a combat naval aviator and NASA astronaut reflects his example of the discipline and dedication that are important for success." Adding to the tension, Senator Slotkin's house was the target of a bomb threat following the video's release. Michigan State Police and Oakland County Sheriff's deputies responded and confirmed no danger, but the incident highlights the heated atmosphere surrounding this controversy. In an interview on X, Patel was asked about his reaction to the lawmaker's video and the investigation. He responded carefully, saying, "Is there a lawful predicate to open up an inquiry and investigation, or is there not? And that decision will be made by the career agents and analysts here at the FBI." When pressed on whether the FBI was involved, Patel said, "Based on the fact that it's an ongoing matter, there's not much I can say." This response raises questions. Is Patel trying to distance himself from what may be seen as a politically motivated investigation? Or is he genuinely leaving the decision to career FBI personnel? Either way, the investigation is proceeding under his watch and with his knowledge, making him ultimately responsible for what many constitutional scholars and even some Republicans see as an alarming abuse of federal law enforcement powers. While external controversies dominate headlines, there's also significant upheaval inside the FBI itself. According to internal emails obtained by the New York Times, Patel has directed major organizational changes. He sent a directive to the majority of FBI field offices, except those in New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles, to report to branch directors rather than the deputy director. This restructuring has created confusion and resentment among FBI personnel who feel the traditional chain of command is being undermined. In a February call with FBI officials, Patel made some unusual proposals. He suggested altering the Bureau's physical fitness test and expressed interest in partnering with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Even more surprisingly, he said he would shift his operations to Nevada, where he lives, and the West Coast. He also expressed interest in joining the FBI's hockey team. These comments struck many career FBI agents as unserious and disconnected from the Bureau's mission. One source described the proposals as showing Patel was not at the Bureau mentally, even if physically present. In March, President Trump mentioned in a speech that Patel had plans to move FBI headquarters to an old Department of Commerce building, suggesting further staff reductions. This potential move has created anxiety among FBI employees about job security and the future direction of the agency. Patel also briefly served as acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives from February to April 2025, adding to questions about his focus and priorities at the FBI. Let's step back and look at what all of this means for America's premier law enforcement agency and our democratic institutions. The FBI has faced criticism from both sides of the political spectrum over the years. Conservatives have accused it of bias against Trump and his allies, while liberals have raised concerns about surveillance overreach and civil liberties violations. But what we're seeing now is different. The FBI's credibility and independence are fundamental to American democracy. When citizens believe that federal law enforcement is being weaponized for political purposes, regardless of which party is in power, it undermines trust in all our institutions. The investigation of the Seditious Six is particularly troubling because it appears to criminalize constitutionally protected speech by elected officials. If members of Congress cannot remind military personnel of their legal obligations without facing FBI investigation, what does that mean for oversight and checks and balances? Constitutional law expert Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School has described the situation as a clear attempt to chill speech and intimidate critics. Other legal scholars have pointed out that investigating Congress members for their statements about legal obligations creates a dangerous precedent that could be abused by any administration, Democratic or Republican. Meanwhile, the personal controversies surrounding Patel, the girlfriend security detail, the frequent travel on government planes, the premature case disclosures on social media, paint a picture of someone who may not fully understand or respect the boundaries that should govern the FBI director's conduct. The FBI director isn't supposed to be a political operative or celebrity. The position requires someone who maintains strict independence, exercises sound judgment, and puts the institution's integrity above personal interests or political loyalty. Former FBI officials from both Republican and Democratic administrations have expressed concerns privately about Patel's tenure. While few are willing to speak on the record, they describe an agency in turmoil, with career agents and analysts demoralized and worried about the Bureau's reputation. So where do we go from here? Despite the White House's strong denials, the question of Patel's future remains open. Political observers note that Trump's public support doesn't guarantee job security. The president has a well-documented pattern of praising officials shortly before firing them. He wants to control the narrative and timing of any personnel changes. If the controversies continue to mount, and if the investigations into the Democratic lawmakers become even more of a political liability, Trump might decide that Patel has become more trouble than he's worth. The reported candidate to replace him, Andrew Bailey, is already in a senior FBI position and would be a relatively smooth transition. On the other hand, Trump values loyalty above almost everything else, and Patel has been unfailingly loyal. The president may decide that standing by Patel sends an important message to his other appointees and supporters. The investigations themselves face uncertain futures. Legal experts predict that any attempt to prosecute the 6 Democratic lawmakers would likely be thrown out on First Amendment grounds. The court-martial threat against Senator Kelly faces significant legal hurdles, as the application of a uniform code of military justice to sitting senators for their legislative speech would be unprecedented and constitutionally questionable. Congress itself may push back. While Republicans control both chambers, some GOP members have already expressed concerns about the investigations. If more Republicans join Democrats in defending the lawmakers, it could create political pressure for the administration to back down. We're also heading into the Thanksgiving holiday, which may provide a natural pause in the action. But come December, with new controversies and the approach of the new year, the situation could reach a critical point. So there you have it, America, the story of Kash Patel and his tumultuous tenure as FBI Director is far from over. It's a story that combines personal controversies with profound constitutional questions. It's about the appropriate use of federal law enforcement powers, the independence of investigative agencies, and the fundamental right of elected officials to speak freely without fear of government retaliation. Whether Patel survives these controversies or becomes yet another casualty of Washington's political warfare remains to be seen. What's certain is that this story has implications far beyond one man's career. The FBI has weathered storms before, from the J. Edgar Hoover era to the controversies of the post-9/11 period. But each crisis tests the institution's resilience and the American people's faith in equal justice under law. As this story develops, we'll continue to follow it closely and bring you updates. The coming weeks will likely bring more revelations, more denials, and possibly more surprises. For now, FBI Director Kash Patel remains in his position, publicly backed by the president but privately questioned by many. The investigations continue, the controversies simmer, and Washington waits to see what happens next. This is America's story. This is your story, and we're committed to bringing you the truth, no matter where it leads. Thank you for watching, and good night.